They called me a failure, but I secretly paid for their life. Until I ended it. I walked into Aunt Linda's house, the smell of roasted chicken and expensive wine filling the air. Laughter echoed from the dining room, but it wasn't the warm, family kind. It was the cruel kind. I paused in the hallway, my hands tightening around the homemade casserole I'd brought just in time to hear my uncle's voice. "Matthew? Please. He's always been a lost cause." Uncle George chuckled. "Living in that tiny apartment, driving that junkyard car. If it weren't for the government assistance, he'd probably be homeless by now." I felt my stomach twist, but I stayed silent, listening. Ryan, my cousin, let out a scoff. "Maybe we should start a GoFundMe for him," he joked, and the entire room erupted in laughter. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. They had no idea. No idea that the house they were standing in, the car payments they bragged about, the credit, cards they maxed out, all of it had been paid for by me. Then, as if to add the final stab, Aunt Linda raised her wine glass and sneered, "He'll always be a nobody, but at least he serves his purpose." The laughter continued, glasses clinking in celebration. My purpose? My jaw clenched. 5 years. 5 years of quietly keeping them afloat while they lived off my parents' money thinking it was a gift from the government. And this is what they thought of me. I took a breath and stepped forward, my heartbeat steady. They had no idea that everything they took for granted was about to disappear. Growing up, I always believed in family. My parents, God rest their souls, had taught me that family takes care of each other, no matter what. When they passed away in a tragic car accident 6 years ago, I was left with not just grief, but responsibility. They had left behind a trust fund, a well-managed account meant to ensure that I, and by extension my family, would never struggle. At first, I wasn't supposed to be the one in charge. My Aunt, Linda, and my Uncle George had taken it upon themselves to help me with the financials. I was just a 26-year-old grieving son, trying to figure out how to keep going. They assured me they'd make sure everything was handled properly, and I, naive and trusting, let them. But within a year, things weren't adding up. They had moved into a bigger house, upgraded their cars, and suddenly my cousins, Ryan and Ethan, who had always whined about being broke, were flaunting new designer clothes and taking vacations. Meanwhile, I was living in a small apartment, driving a car that was older than my college diploma, and working extra hours to make sure I wasn't touching too much of the trust. It wasn't until I started digging through financial records that I realized the truth. There was no government assistance program for accident victims, like my aunt had always claimed. The mortgage, the car payments, the extravagant purchases, they were being covered by withdrawals from the trust. My trust? My parents' money. I confronted them once, 2 years ago, about why so much money was being taken out. Aunt Linda had laughed it off. "Oh, Matthew, sweetie," she cooed, placing a manicured hand on my shoulder. "This is just how families work. You wouldn't want us to struggle, would you?" And like a fool, I let it go. Because she was right. What kind of man would I be if I let my family struggle when I had the means to help? So I stayed quiet. I let them believe I was struggling. I let them mock my simple lifestyle, let them pity me while they drank expensive wine at a table I had unknowingly paid for. But something changed that night at dinner. It wasn't just the money anymore. It was the way they looked down on me, the way they laughed at me. They didn't just take from me. They thought I was beneath them, and that's when I knew. I wasn't going to let them take another dime. I stayed quiet that night, eating my food, listening to their laughter, pretending nothing was wrong. But in my head, I was making calls, closing accounts, and setting things in motion. They had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. My mind was still buzzing from the night before, from the way Aunt Linda had smirked, from the way Ryan had laughed, from the way they all toasted to their own success that had been built on my money, my parents' legacy. I sat at my small kitchen table, the same one I'd had since college, and opened my laptop. It was time to face the numbers. I logged into the trust's financial portal, my fingers steady as I pulled up the records. Page after page, line after line, each expense a slap in the face. Mortgage for their home, $2,500 a month, paid for entirely by the trust. Car payments, Ryan's luxury SUV, Ethan's sports car, $950 a month combined. Credit cards, shopping sprees, expensive dinners, flights to exotic locations, $60,000 over the last 5 years. Golf club membership for Uncle George, $400 a month. I didn't even know he played golf. Upcoming vacation to Hawaii, $8,200. Booked last week. I wasn't invited. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. $312,000. That's how much they had taken since my parents passed. $312,000 while I drove a 12-year-old sedan and packed my lunch for work. But the worst part? They didn't just take my money. They pitied me. They mocked me, joked about my car, my apartment, my simple life, as if I was the failure. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. I picked up my phone and called my financial advisor, Mr. Holloway. He had always been kind to me, probably the only person who actually respected that I wasn't reckless with the money my parents left behind. "Matthew," he answered, "what can I do for you?" "I want everything shut down," I said. "Every account that they have access to, every automatic payment linked to them. Cut it all off, immediately." There was a pause. "Are you sure? That's going to cause, well, a lot of problems on their end." I let out a slow breath, feeling the weight on my chest start to lift. "Good. Let them deal with it." "All right," he said, sounding a little impressed. "I'll start the process today. You'll have the final paperwork by tomorrow." I hung up and took a deep sip of my coffee, savoring the quiet moment. They had no idea. In a matter of days, the house they were living in, the cars they were driving, the vacations they were planning, it would all start to unravel. I wasn't going to warn them. I was going to let them feel it. The next 48 hours were quiet, too quiet. I knew it was the calm before the storm. While Aunt Linda, Uncle George, Ryan, and Ethan continued their lives, oblivious to what was coming, I finalized every last detail. By the time I received the official confirmation from Mr. Holloway, the switch had been flipped. Their mortgage payments were no longer being covered. The credit card payments had stopped processing. The automatic withdrawals for their cars? Canceled. The family trust that had been their invisible safety net for 5 years? Dissolved, and I didn't say a word. I waited. It started with Ryan. Late in the afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text. "Ryan, hey man, super random, but my car payment didn't go through. Did the trust get delayed or something?" I smirked and left him on read. A few hours later, Ethan called, his voice casual but tight. "Hey, cuz, weird thing. My bank just sent me an alert about my credit card being overdue. Thought the insurance payout covered all that. Guess not," I said simply. "Might want to check with your bank." The next morning, it got worse. Aunt Linda called 3 times before I finally answered. "Matthew, sweetheart, there's been some kind of mistake," she said, her voice dripping with forced politeness. "I just got off the phone with the mortgage company, and they're saying the last payment was rejected. Some sort of error with the funding?" I leaned back in my chair, watching the city skyline through my window, savoring the moment. "Not an error," I said calmly. "I cut off the payments." Silence. Then her voice turned sharp. "Excuse me?" I shut everything down. "Aunt Linda," I said, my tone even. "The mortgage, the cars, the credit cards. It's over. You're on your own now." There was a deep inhale, the kind she took before a full-blown tantrum. "Matthew, this is ridiculous. That money is for family. We have a system." "No," I corrected her. You had a system. A system where you spent my parents' money and mocked me behind my back. A system where you lived in luxury while calling me a failure. That system is over. You ungrateful little—" she started, but I cut her off. Ungrateful? I laughed. I've been paying for your life while you insulted me, and now you're mad because you actually have to pay your own bills? You can't do this to us, she hissed. We'll lose everything. I shrugged. Then maybe you should have saved some of that government assistance you thought was paying for your house. The line went dead. And then, the chaos began. Within hours, Uncle George left me a voicemail threatening legal action. I laughed and deleted it. Ryan called again, this time panicked. Dude, my bank says they're repossessing my car if I don't make the payment by next week. That sucks, I said, my voice neutral. You can't just cut us off like this, man. Ryan, I said, finally losing patience. For 5 years, I've been covering your life. You never once asked where the money was coming from. You never once thanked me. You just assumed you deserved it. But guess what? You don't. Dude, please, he started, his bravado finally cracking. I exhaled, my voice firm. Figure it out, like I had to. And I hung up. One by one, their world was unraveling, and I had never felt lighter. By the third day, the real panic set in. It started with Aunt Linda showing up at my apartment. I saw her through the peephole, dressed in her usual expensive blouse, but her hair slightly out of place, her face twisted in barely concealed rage. She pounded on the door like a debt collector. Matthew, open this door right now. I took my time, letting her stew for a moment before finally unlocking the door and standing in the doorway, arms crossed. Linda, I said flatly. She pushed forward like she was going to barge in, but I didn't. Move. She had no choice but to stop, her face red with frustration. We need to talk, she demanded. I leaned casually against the doorframe. We are talking. She let out a sharp breath. This isn't funny, Matthew. I just got off the phone with the mortgage company. They're saying if we don't make a payment in the next 15 days, they're starting foreclosure proceedings. I raised an eyebrow. Sounds serious. Her nostrils flared. Of course it's serious, and it's your fault. I tilted my head, amused. Oh, so now I'm responsible for your house. Her lips pressed together so tightly they turned white. You were, and you should be. Your parents would be ashamed of you, treating your own family this way. I laughed, actually laughed, right in her face. Oh, you mean my parents, the ones who worked their entire lives to build something for me, only for you to siphon it all away like leeches. Those parents? She sputtered, caught off guard. We're family, Matthew. I dropped the amusement from my face. No, Linda. Family doesn't do what you did. She tried again, her voice taking on a desperate edge. We just need some time, a little help to get back on our feet, I scoffed. You had 5 years of help. You had free money, a free house, free cars, free vacations. You had every opportunity to save, to invest, to plan ahead. Instead, you spent it like it was never going to run out. That's not my problem. Tears welled in her eyes. Real this time. I think, for the first time, it was sinking in. But what are we supposed to do? She whispered. I shrugged. That's not my problem either. Her sadness flickered into rage again. You'll regret this, Matthew. When we're gone, when we lose the house, when everything falls apart, you'll regret this. I gave her a slow, measured look. No, Linda, I won't. And I shut the door in her face. The fallout begins. By the end of the week, Uncle George's golf club membership was revoked due to unpaid dues. Ryan's SUV was repossessed and he started panicking about his image. Ethan was looking for a second job, realizing too late that he couldn't keep up his lifestyle without me. Their Hawaii vacation? Canceled. Since it was booked on a family card linked to the trust, The refund went straight back into my account. They had mocked me for years, believing I was the failure, the joke, the poor relative. Now, I was the only one left standing. The silence didn't last long. By the second week, my phone was blowing up. Calls, texts, voicemails ranging from desperate pleas to outright threats. I ignored most of them, except for one. Ethan. Unlike Ryan, who was all bravado and entitlement, Ethan had always been the quieter one. Not any better than the rest, but at least he wasn't the type to openly mock me. So, when his name popped up on my screen, I debated for a second before finally answering. There was no anger in his voice, no arrogance, just defeat. "Matt," he started, voice strained. "Look, man, I know things got out of hand. I know Mom and Dad were bad about it, and I know I wasn't much better." I stayed silent. Let him talk. I didn't realize how much you were covering. I never thought about it. I never even asked. And now, everything's gone to hell. The house, the cars, the credit. Cards, the payments. It's like... He let out a shaky breath. I don't know what to do. I took a moment before answering. "What do you want from me, Ethan?" He hesitated. "I need advice. I need to know how you did it. How you managed your money. Because I never learned. Mom and Dad never taught us, and now I'm screwed." For the first time, someone in that family finally got it. Not demanding. Not blaming. Just a broken man realizing too late that the free ride was over. So, for the next hour, I did something I never thought I'd do. I walked him through everything. How to budget. How to cut unnecessary expenses. How to fix his credit before it collapsed completely. How to live within his means, because the days of free luxury were gone. By the end of the call, Ethan sounded different, still struggling, still scared, but maybe, just maybe, a little wiser. "Thanks, man," he murmured. "I mean it." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Don't thank me yet. Just prove to yourself that you can fix this." He exhaled sharply. "Yeah, I will." 1 down. 3 to go. Meanwhile, Aunt Linda was losing it. While Ethan was learning how to survive, his parents were refusing to accept reality. Uncle George tried pulling one last desperate stunt. A voicemail from him crackled through my phone late that night. "You listen here, boy," he growled. "You think you're so damn smart? You think cutting us off is the right move? Well, you're gonna regret this. We have lawyers, you know. We're looking into whether that trust money even belonged to you in the first place." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my phone. Lawyers? What case did he think he had? I was the legal trustee. Every transaction, every payment, every withdrawal had my authorization. There was nothing he could do. I didn't even bother calling back. Let him waste his time, and what little money he had left, on a battle he was going to lose. Then, there, was Aunt Linda. She wasn't threatening. She was begging. "Matthew," she sniffled in a voicemail, "please, we raised you like a son. We took you in after your parents died." Lies. They had never taken me in, never supported me, never offered me a dime. It had always been me taking care of them. And now that the money was gone, they had nothing. I didn't call her back either. Their perfect world had crumbled. By the end of the month, the house was in foreclosure. The cars were gone. The credit cards were maxed out with no way to pay them off. Ryan, the one who mocked me the most, moved back into a tiny apartment, struggling to afford rent. Uncle George had to take a part-time job just to keep food on the table. Everything they had, everything they flaunted had never been theirs to begin with. And now, they were learning exactly what that meant. A month after the collapse of their perfect little world, I found myself driving past their house. Or what used to be their house. The foreclosure notice was nailed to the front door. The fancy landscaping that Aunt Linda had once bragged about was overgrown. The luxury cars were gone, replaced by an old beat-up sedan in the driveway. It was poetic. For 5 years they had lived like kings, while mocking me for living within my means. And now, they had nothing but me. I had everything. I pulled into my new driveway, a modest home, fully paid off with my money, my hard work, not stolen from someone else. I sat in my trash car, the same car they had mocked me for, the one they thought was a symbol of failure. But I had it detailed to perfection. The engine purred like new. It was fully paid off, just like my home. Unlike them, I had never pretended to be rich. Unlike them, I had never relied on someone else's money. Unlike them, I had no debt, no foreclosure, no desperation. I stepped inside, the air crisp with fresh paint, the scent of a home that was truly mine, and instead of wasting what was left of the trust, I had done something better. I had started a scholarship fund in my parents' name. The money that once kept my entitled family afloat. It would now help struggling students, real people in need, who actually deserved it. As I stood there in my kitchen, sipping my coffee, I got one last call, a blocked number. I knew who it was. I let it ring, then I deleted the voicemail. This was the end. They weren't my problem anymore. I was finally, truly free. If there's one thing this story teaches, it's that self-respect and financial independence are everything. Never let anyone take advantage of your kindness just because they call themselves family. True family supports you, not drains you. Learn to set boundaries, recognize toxic relationships, and most importantly, know your worth. Wealth isn't about flashy cars or big houses. It's about stability, freedom, and control over your own life. Don't let guilt or manipulation keep you stuck. Sometimes walking away is the best decision you can make. And trust me, when you do, you'll never regret it.